Yes, I am.
Oh, you are? Okay, I didn't know who the vice, I didn't know who the.
I think Craig nominated me and no one disputed it. I should have, but I didn't have enough sense.
Were you absent that day? Come on,
I think I must have been.
that's one reason never to skip a meeting.
Really.
That meeting anyhow, huh?
Yes.
Mike, do you
What do you
know,
think?
is there gonna be any buyouts in the county for flood damage?
Yes, there's quite a few. The 50% rule kicks in.
Okay, so if they have more than 50% damage,
Right. So the initial assessments have gone out for most people. We still have some that are going out. I got a call today from the letters in the packet, they call it a packet, it's still going out, it kind of breaks down the initial assessment. The rough estimate, or county's estimates on fixing things. And some people are saying that those are really high numbers, that it'll be much lower than that, and therefore not 50%.
By the way, I'm going to start in about 5 seconds.
I'll visit with you later on.
Yep, absolutely.
Good evening. Welcome to the August 21st, 2019 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. At this time, I would request that everyone please turn off or mute all cell phones. Let's please stand now for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Applications for rezoning heard during tonight's meeting will be voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The commission will then make a recommendation on the applications, which will be submitted to St. Charles County Council for a final decision. The individual items and bills for this evening's applications are scheduled to be introduced at the Monday, September 9th, 2019 County Council meeting. Applications for preliminary plats heard during tonight's meeting will also be voted on by the Planning and Zoning Commission during the meeting. The vote on preliminary plats is final unless a variance from St. Charles County ordinances is being requested or the commission makes a recommendation for denial of a preliminary plat. In those instances, the plat would be introduced at the Monday, September 9th, 2019 County Council meeting for a final decision. The following documents are introduced as a matter of record for this evening's publication, public hearing, and regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning meeting. The Unified Development Ordinance of St. Charles County, including zoning maps, the year 2030 Master Plan for St. Charles County, which includes the year 2030 Land Use Plan map. So, tonight's first meeting, our first application is application PR 19-09. I'm sorry, got myself messed up, apologize. Tonight's first request is a rezoning of RZ 19-10. The applicants, property owners are Timothy J. Burkemper and Deborah A. Burkemper, Kenneth C. Hawkins, and Ronald S. Bowers and Ruth Ann Bowers. The existing zoning is I-1 Light Industrial District. The requested zoning is I-2 Heavy Industrial District. The 2030 Master Plan recommends industrial use. The parcel size is 22 acres. Its location is on the east side of Highway 94, approximately 750 feet north of Hawning Road, adjacent to the city of St. Charles, Council District 6. Staff?
All right, on this application, it's not actually on Hawning Road, as you've probably figured out. It is located off of Highway 94, approximately 400 feet north of Hawning Road. The property right now is currently zoned light industrial. And there it goes. light industrial. It does have floodplain on it. This is what's considered floodplain fringe, floodway fringe. And this cross-hatched section is the density floodway, which has special restrictions in the floodplain. The density floodway requires that there be no more than 18% of the parcel be obstructed. If they exceed that 18%, then they have to do a separate no-rise. But without exceeding that 18%, a no-rise separate certificate is not required from the professional engineer. As we pointed out, the master plan does call for this to be industrial use. It does not differentiate between light industrial and heavy industrial. It just calls for it to be industrial in nature. What staff did, what we did do is reach out to the city of St. Charles because if any development did take place on this parcel, they would need utilities through the city. They'd also probably require, more policing and water, sewer, et cetera. But I don't believe the applicant is currently, I'll let the engineers speak about this, but they're not intending to develop it with a building. What they would like to do right now is do something similar to what is located to the south of this property, a portion of it as RV storage or other storage, and then the other portion, I believe he has truck, semi-trailer storage. And so staff would require also that a commercial permit be obtained for the entrance from MoDOT. This property also does have a water course towards the front of the property. We would require the 25-foot buffer area on this. And then we would also require landscaping along the front. So actually, it may turn out to look a little better than what it does right now. But with that, staff is recommending approval of this rezoning. We did not find any objection from the city, and the surrounding uses are light industrial and heavy industrial in nature. We did receive one letter of concern from Charles and Suzanne Witt.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Since the city didn't have an issue, do you think that there's any merit to this concern? That the flooding could impact the subdivision?
Well,
Because of all the extra concrete and the water runoff?
when a site is being developed, we don't just receive a site plan, we would also receive what's a land disturbance plan.
Mm-hmm.
So this is when we would take a look at that issue. They may require detention or a retention area. We just don't know yet until
Sure.
that develops. That's one of the reasons too for the rezoning. It gives a little bit more flexibility so that we can work with the owner and help develop and do something with the property.
Very good, thank you.
And could, on that 3.96 acres, is that area that can be roofed, or what does that refer to in terms of the limits of the development, the 3.96 acres? Is that referring to parking area and any kind of other improvements associated, or do you?
It's referred to as obstruction of the floodway.
Okay.
The applicant may not do any type of development. It may be a case of just leveling out what this property is and how it currently exists. We just don't know yet at this development stage.
Okay, thank you much. Any other questions? So for tonight, what we'll do is we'll bring up the applicant, sign them, swear them in, and staff, and I should say council will ask questions if any come up. And at that point, after the applicant has presented their case, members of the public will have a chance to come up and comment on it. If you are going to do so, please speak out, fill out a speaker card, and put it with Sheila. Okay, thank you very much. And we'd like to ask, now who's going to be coming up for the, okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Mike Miners with St. Charles Engineering and Surveying, 801 South Fifth Street, St. Charles, Missouri.
And please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. As Ellie mentioned, there's 22 acres that actually I'm working with Fred Dyer, who's here this evening, and he has a contract to purchase the property. He is proposing to create a vehicle storage and trailer and boat storage lot on this parcel. And actually, there's no plans to build a building, so there wouldn't be any need for sanitary or sewer service or water service. The site itself has been elevated in the past, and there's a section of the area that's shown within the density floodway, where actually there's a little section that isn't shown, that's been elevated up above the 100-year floodplain. So with the 18%, it may allow Mr. Dyer to raise about 3+ acres up above the 100-year floodplain, and then the remainder, as Ellie mentioned, that if we would want to fill further, then we'd have to verify through hydraulic analysis that it wouldn't cause a rise to the high water level. So we're planning an entrance through the grass area that's out front, which is actually outside of the floodway itself, the other side of that channel that runs through the grass, and I can actually help a little bit better instead of pointing. Yeah, there you go. That channel right in here, yeah, it divides the density floodway area to the fringe area. So technically, this area could be filled without the no-rise certification, but it really wouldn't make sense because that property is down at Highway 94 level, and he may end up storing some vehicles there, but the real intent is further back to create the storage lot. Actually, this is the area right in here that's already raised up above the 100-year flood elevation. So we chose the I-2 zoning so that we wouldn't have to go through the major conditional use process for storage yard. And it kind of makes sense. This area is kind of like an industrial area. That way we could submit a plan to the staff and they would review the plan, obviously the engineering involved with the hydraulics, certainly the stormwater hydraulics. I don't think Mr. Dyer is planning on paving the entire area. It would probably be gravel, and that has more permeable aspects to it. So we're just looking to try to create, and actually this year, this area was out of the water. There was a little bit of water down in this area. That's a little bit lower, but this area was actually higher than the water rose up this year. So basically vehicle storage yard, yeah, we'll clear the trees and work with staff on the buffer and the landscaping once we get a plan put together if we're successful with the rezoning. So I'm sure Fred can answer any other questions, but it's typical vehicle storage, and potentially some containers. And the use next door to the north is a treatment plant. I don't really think we'll interfere with that. And then there's actually similar use up front in this area where there's, as Ellie mentioned, there's currently storage lot. I think that was actually underwater, that area in here with the recent flooding. But otherwise, that's our request, and I'd be certainly happy to try to answer any other questions you may have.
Is there any questions of applicant? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, wait. Oh, you did. I'm sorry.
How many vehicles will be stored there, you think?
That's 22 acres, and I think we'll kind of phase it in over time. So I don't know, it could be quite a few. the total site is 22 acres, so we're not really limiting or asking for a certain number. It'll probably, depending on the demand, if he fills it up, then he may proceed on and try to develop some more of the property in the vehicle storage area.
Thank you.
Okay?
What kind of security are you gonna have there?
Fence, you gonna have a fence around it, or what? Fred probably needs to answer that one.
I'm sorry,
They're asking about a fence, so you're gonna have to go through.
Oh, yeah, we definitely have to.
to. Swear in. Okay. State your name and
Fred
address.
Dyer.
And do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and perjury?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. Please proceed.
Yeah, basically, if you could scroll the map down a little bit, I own that portion of ground right there, 42 acres, and it is zoned heavy industrial. And then the next piece of property is the city's with the pump station and the lagoons. And so, in my estimation, then it makes sense to have this heavy industrial too, because it just fits the area. But basically, we want to use this for storage, and much like what we're doing now. Because I'm in the density floodway, I could only fill 8 acres of my property, and so I'm about full. So I'm looking for some more ground to handle any other vehicles that come along. And as far as the number, I just don't know at the present time. A lot depends on if they're, 53-foot trailers, they take up a lot more room. I'm sure we'll have some containers on it. And so I guess I can't give you an exact number. And then it all depends on what we can work out with the buffer and all of that, with the ditch going through the property, and how we lay out the trailers and how we're going to space them. So,
You gonna have a fence around it?
yeah, definitely we'd have to fence it, yes.
Fence. Okay. Does that answer your question about the security? Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other
Other
questions?
questions?
Yeah, I got one. Fred, this is basically going to be the same type of operation that you have down the road there?
Correct, yes.
So it's not trailers as we're thinking maybe of them as being travel trailers. These are trailers behind
Yeah,
tractor trailers.
tractor trailers and that sort of thing. And
type of
containers,
storage.
shipping containers, storage.
But really not on-wheel storage for recreational vehicles and boats?
We could end up with some, but basically what I'm more interested in is.
Just like your other
Is
property.
what I have of my other property. And basically, tractor trailers. I do have one lot there that is for cars. And this guy collects the cars, and then when he gets quite a few, then he sends them off to an auction. It's more or less a staging area for the cars. So basically, that's all.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you much.
Thank you.
Does anyone from the audience like to come back and comment? Either plus or minus. Please state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Arnie C. A.C. Dienoff, public advocate and resident. My mailing address is P.O. Box 1535, O'Fallon.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the commission. As we all know, because this is in a floodplain fringe, the limited development is to 18%. We all know that this area floods. This water has and will have to go somewhere. By rising the property, you're going to cause upstream flooding to other property owners. And I think we need to be very careful on treading water in this area about this flood area. As we all know, the last probably 10 years, it's probably flooded 3 or 4 times severely. So that's a consideration. Also of consideration, since they're dealing with semi-tractor trailers, tractor trailer trucks, storage of vehicles, contamination, runoff, environmental concerns, water quality feeding back to the Missouri River. As we all know, the city of St. Charles has wells that feed from the river area, and I want to make sure that that water is clean, good quality, and filtered properly. The tree removal is of consideration. As we all talked about the bluffs in past weeks, this property also needs to be held to that same standard as our county code, codified code of ordinances, which has a threshold of tree preservation and a limited amount of trees that can be removed. And if the ones that are being removed, they need to plant with other trees. So I want to make sure that that's being done. We haven't heard from staff on that portion. The landscaping is of consideration. I would like the commission to consider a type 3 buffer, landscaping, and a berm. I think it's very necessary to adjoining property owners to ensure their utmost highest value and yield of their property. And I haven't seen a letter from our partners. I haven't seen a letter about the city of St. Charles, if they're concerned about this or not. I heard about the water and sewer, but I think that they need to be on the record in some type of letter. I haven't heard from the Rivers Fire Protection District whether they can adequately service this property, or the Missouri Department of Transportation if they're going to allow the entrance. I don't know if they've decided about that or not. And of course, conditions, if I asked for the other storage units in St. Charles County, the following conditions, I'd like the commission to address these since staff decided not to. That no derelict or unlicensed vehicles remain on the property. That no repairs be made on the property. That no wrecked vehicles, boats, semi-tractor trailers remain on the property more than 1 month, so the owners can deal with the insurance companies and appropriate people with that, adjusters. That no tires be stored on the property. That no parts accumulate and be stored on the property. And that no one decides to live on the property, i.e. in their semi-tractor trailer or a motorhome. We had that situation in O'Fallon where tractor trailers were being stored and somebody decided to live there. I-1 light industrial and I-1-2 or I-2 industrial is not an appropriate condition for living, and so that had to be rectified by code enforcement. And finally, the fencing. I would ask the commission to put a condition of a site-proof fence, and as in the last storage facility that failed this commission and the county council off of Highway N and Hopewell Road, that an iron fence of some type of decorative be provided so that it enhances the quality of life and the highest yield for adjoining property owners. Those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The sewer plant and the storage lot.
So would applicant like to come up and address any of those items? The applicants in terms of the environmental concerns, things such as that?
This is actually a zoning request.
Right,
So
okay.
we haven't even.
You'll be addressing that at the time when you
We'll address that
submit a
all with the
plan.
staff when we submit our plans. And those are appropriate things that need to be considered, but
Right,
that's.
when you
that's-
do your plan. Okay,
We
very good.
haven't got that done yet, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from? Okay. Discussion.
Motion for approval.
Second.
Motion for approval. Okay. And Ms. Sale, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. Klinghammer?
Yes.
And Chair says yes. The motion passes 6-0. Okay, the next item on the agenda is application PRE 19-10. It's a preliminary plat for the enclave at Lauderdale Estates, 9 Lauderdale Lane. The owner-developer is Bellis S. Lauderdale. Bax Engineering is the property surveyor. The property zoning is RR, single-family residential. Proposed lots is 6. Parcel size is 19.08 acres. Location is on the northwest corner of Lauderdale Lane and Highway DD. It's in Council District 2. Staff?
This is a pretty straightforward request for a plat that includes 6 lots, preliminary plat, an extension of the Lauderdale subdivision that's been carried out over a period of several years. So again, it would be 6 lots on a cul-de-sac, and this would be the terminus of this lane that's been built in phases or stages. There were some recent comments that staff had about a few items that needed to be addressed in order to bring the plat into conformity, and those have now been addressed. So county staff is recommending for approval of the preliminary plat.
Okay. Are there any questions, staff? Okay, thank you. With that, could the applicant please come forward?
Whether they use this or not, I'm at least going to put it down here.
Okay,
Good evening,
please-
my name is
please-
Dale
Yep.
Bax. I'm with Bax Engineering, 221 Point West Boulevard, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301.
Please raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Great, thank you very much. Here tonight, as mentioned, we're representing Della Lauderdale. We have her grandson and her great-grandson, Dan and Dan Lauderdale, both with us in the audience for tonight. Here to get a preliminary plat approved. We have 19.08 acres. We're located basically the southeast corner of D and Double D. It's an existing subdivision that Bill Cross is building homes in on the existing 3-acre subdivision called the Crossings at Lauderdale Estates. It is existing zoning as RR. We're proposing 6 3-acre lots with a private road built to public standards. What they built in phase are the Crossings is a concrete street. It's a beautiful subdivision. They're going to extend that street into this subdivision and terminate in a cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sac does meet fire district regulations. All the lots are 3 acres. The project is served by a public water system. All the houses will be on a septic system. And we will not be disturbing any natural waterways. We do have some natural waterways that will be designated on a record plat. We'll have very minimal tree removal to put the road in and just enough trees to put some nice homes in there. And we just want to keep it as natural as possible. I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bax. Is any questions of Mr. Bax? Hearing none, we will now open it up to the floor. Any discussions? All right, no discussions. We'll bring it back to the council here for our discussion.
I'm good.
Make a motion for approval.
Second.
All right, motion has been passed, or motion has been unseconded. Okay, Ms. Sales?
Yes.
Mr. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Klinghammer?
Yes.
And I vote yes also. The motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good. Sally? Okay, sorry.
I didn't know if it mattered for the
Okay.
record.
Okay, so at this point, we'd like to introduce a table application from prior, and I need a motion to have this brought up from the table.
I move we remove the private road dedication plat from the table and bring it forward for discussion.
Do we have a second? Sorry. All right. This application is the private road dedication, Plat 1, located east of Highway T. The application is PR 19-9. Owner developer is Interstate Drive LLC, the property surveyors Premier Design Group. The property zoning is A, agricultural district, 5 acre minimum, and the council district is 2. Staff, please discuss.
This is an application to dedicate a road. It's not an application to create lots. So with the typical subdivision, you'll see both the proposed road and proposed lots at the same time, and those lots will be within a subdivision. But in this case, again, it's just a road. We call it a road dedication. So if you're simply dedicating a road, this is according to the ordinance, this is the procedures for doing so. Now, you may know that there's 2 ways to create new parcels of land. One, going through the subdivision process and creating a subdivision plat. And the other is if you're exempt under our code from having to do a subdivision, you can create lots or parcels, I should say, under state law and state requirements. And there's some requirements to do that. You have to create a licensed land surveyor has to create a survey. You have to record that survey in the county recorder's office. So that's a separate process that we don't even see if you're doing that under state law. So again, there's kind of 2 different processes here. If you have a street, a public or private street, and you're creating parcels of 10 or more acres, you can do that second process and follow the state law for how to create parcels. So you can create 10-acre parcels on a private or public street, and it would not necessarily come before this body. So in order to create 10-acre, in order to create, I'll say, a private street, this is what we're doing here in this situation, in order to get to or allow the latter to take place. So what you have before you is this private street dedication within an 80-acre tract, but the 80-acre tract itself is not a subdivision, and it's not really part of the consideration so much. The tract, though, has what I'll say, a peculiarity or a limitation, and that is the entrance. If you look in the far corner, top left corner of the tract, the existing road that goes from Highway T to the west to this tract, it dead ends in what I'll call this notch. So that notch is the only access to this 80-acre tract. Consequently, if you want to enter this tract from that road, you have to have a street that makes a 90-degree turn, essentially. And a 90-degree turn doesn't necessarily meet the subdivision regulations requirements for the minimum radius. And so one of the things that we'll be talking about tonight is a variance request to address that, because this is their only access. They can't come in any other way. This is the only way they can come in. The second variance that they're requesting is for the length of cul-de-sac. 2 other variances for the curvature of the street can be addressed, and I think will be addressed rather than doing it by a variance. It can be addressed administratively as long as the street is posted for 15 or 20 miles per hour speed limit. So when you get past the entranceway and you follow those curves around the water feature that's existing and the areas that have where there's not as solid ground for a roadway, those curves, again, can be dealt with administratively as long as it's posted for 15 miles an hour. So I think that can be addressed without necessarily having to obtain a variance. Because variances are involved, you may recall that a plat such as this has to go to the county council. So this would be a recommendation for approval or for denial with certain variances, and that recommendation would be made to the county council. So county staff is recommending that you recommend approval with the requested variances. And I know the applicant is here tonight, or the applicant's representative, and they can answer, I think, further questions on more details.
So the variances that we're discussing are the angle of the drive as it comes into the
Right.
property, and the other one was
The length of the cul-de-sac.
length.
Yeah. Now, just so you'll know, just within the last 2 days, the applicant and the county has talked about an alternative configuration coming in there at the entrance, and I think the applicant can probably give you more information about that, and maybe a way to avoid having to get one type of variance, but it may require another, so.
Okay, any questions of staff?
What's your recommendation, Robert?
Our recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval along with the variances for the reasons cited in the letter from the applicant.
All righty. Any other questions? We ask the applicant to come forward, please. Please state your name, address,
Brad Goss.
and address.
Okay, 120.
I'm sorry.
Looked like, Dale was jumping the gun, so I was waiting.
Okay.
120 South Central, Suite 700, St. Louis, 63105. And, Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like to have our engineer sworn in as well, because you may want to have questions
Okay.
asked of him.
Please state your name.
Justin Winters with Premier Design Group, 100 Midpoint Drive.
Okay, thank you. And I guess you can both answer this together. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Quick question, did you bring Elizabeth with you? Because she tends to be a little bit more brief than you are, so. Just wondering.
She gave me a lot of
All right.
tips
Okay.
tonight,
All
so
right.
hopefully I'll be able to achieve that
Okay.
standard. And in fact, from the outset, we're going to withdraw one variance for you.
All
So
right.
there you go. We had adjusted the plan, so we do not need a variance for the cul-de-sac length. We went and, since we got staff comments, we looked at it, thought, okay, is there a way for us to do this so we don't need that variance? So that is not a variance that we need to talk about tonight.
Great.
And are not requesting. And I do need to have my PowerPoint brought up, though. There we go. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to quickly go through this because I think the staff has identified where the property is, and there was a, on this, whoa, don't do that. So I'm going to skip that. In the preliminary plat, staff identified that in the staff report. I've given you my PowerPoint so that you can see that and follow it. Really, the variance request that we're focused on is the entrance. And under the UDO 410-480, the commission and council can grant a variance when there is, when strict application of the requirements contained in the chapter would cause practical difficulties due to topographic conditions or characteristics involving the size, shape, or contours of the property. And that's really what we're talking about here. Our entrance, which is the only entrance to the property, is up in the upper left-hand corner. It's in the northwestern corner of the site. And when we come into that entrance, there's only one way in. That entrance has been there. It's been pre-existing for probably the better part of 80 years. As a consequence, we just can't meet the county's curvature requirement. What the staff brought up to us, I think it was yesterday, was to consider whether we could instead of having the entrance coming in, just turning, whether we could turn this into kind of a T entrance. So you'd have we kind of fill up that top notch and then have a drive, the main drive coming down. So it'd be kind of like what you call a hammerhead or a T intersection. And we're willing to do that, happy to do it. The problem is that our engineers looked at it, and his preliminary look at that says, well, we're still going to have a problem with the angle. We're not going to meet that angle requirement. So we are requesting the variance for the entrance with the understanding that we will work with staff, county staff, and if we're able to put in that T intersection as they've requested, with their approving whatever that angle adjustment may have to be, that we'd be allowed to do that. So either of those approaches work for us. It'll give us access to the site, and we're more than happy to work with the staff as far as that intersection is concerned. But otherwise, there's nothing else we can do. We simply can't reconfigure this entrance to meet the design that would otherwise meet the radius requirement for the St. Charles County standards. The site, this is the entrance. When you come in, the property on the upper left-hand corner, that's the road coming in off of Highway T. To the left is a shed that belongs to the property owner to the north. You take the turn to the right, and you'll enter onto our property. The middle photo on the top, you're looking at the road and looking up at the shed, and then the photo on the right shows how the road would go past that shed. And then the photos in the bottom row are showing you how the property, again, the drive comes up toward the shed and then turning around, accesses down to the property. So that's what the Rock Road looks like on the site. That's the road leading from the entrance into the property. You can see once you get past that turn, it's something that's very reasonable and gentle as far as drivability is concerned. The two areas that we're going to talk to work with staff on, areas B and C, that we did not achieve the curve radius. All of those are caused by water conditions on the site. There is a water course that runs through from area B across where the road is. So we do have a culvert underneath the road to take that water. But the soil, there's a pond to the west, and so we get water overflow. And so we do need to keep the road up, and the soil is very spongy. It's just not suitable to put a road in. So that's something. And then when you get past that, where you have area C, what happens is the road, and it's a little bit difficult to tell from these pictures, but the road drops off pretty severely on either side. And so if we try to achieve the radius there, we're going to end up, ending up with a worse condition on the site. So that's why we followed that. That's why we followed the contours as we did. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have. Or Justin, obviously, can answer any questions from an engineering perspective.
So at where the actual turn is, where we're looking at the variance, how wide is that drivable surface at that point?
Oh, we've got 42-foot wide right-of-way, and we meet the conditions of the county with respect to the road and the gravel width and all of that. We're not asking for any change.
No, I understand. Just want to make sure I understand the width, but you have 42 feet of right-of-way there. So
we do.
Do it correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quick question. How wide would that little notch or that little toe sticking up there need to be to accommodate what the county, to meet the county's requirements?
Oh, probably about 200, 300 feet. I don't know.
Can your engineer answer that, or?
Yeah, he can, but I mean, we don't own the property. That's the problem.
I know.
We'd have to acquire the property to the east in order to do that.
I didn't get a chance to go there. What, is that a farm field, or what is it to the north?
It's a farm field.
Okay.
And in fact, we are going to give them an easement so they'll be able to access their property. Technically, they're landlocked. So we're going to accommodate them. And I think that's another good reason to try and do this T like staff had suggested earlier. I think it'll help them, and so that's what we want to do.
So will the T will essentially stub into the property next?
Yeah, to
Is
the
that the
east.
idea?
So what you do
Yeah.
is you just have, it'd be like a road coming in, and it'd be like a typical road coming in intersecting another road. And then so, depending on what the folks do to the north at some future point in time, that will give them an appropriate entrance to their property. And Justin, if you can answer Councilman Klinghammer's question, please do.
Yeah, what was the question? To accommodate, I guess, the 150-degree radius that would be required per county standards.
What would you have to do to the notch?
The notch, yeah, would have to be moved further to the east, which it currently does not exist of that nature. And right now, you know, we're showing the 30-foot radius, so to get to the 150, you know, we would need 120 feet beyond, I guess, the points of tangency for that radius. So to answer your question, we're probably about 100 feet short of property to make that 150 degree radius.
I'm just, again, I didn't go there, but since you're making access for that property owner to the north, was this idea approached to him or to them?
No, we're just doing it to be nice. Quite frankly, we don't want them to be landlocked. I mean,
Did anybody talk
we
to
don't
them
think that's
about,
very neighborly.
did anybody talk to them about selling some of the land to accommodate
No.
this common shared road?
No, no.
It's not a bad idea, so don't make a face.
No, I mean,
Okay.
it's not something my client needs to go out and acquire
Gotcha.
on property.
Thank you.
This is all we've got, and that's really what the variance,
Gotcha.
when you have a condition on your property that you can't remedy, that's what the county code's supposed to allow.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you much.
Thank you.
Please come forward, anyone who has comments. Okay, please state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Arnie C. A.C. Dinoff, public advocate and resident. My mailing address is P.O. Box 1535, O'Fallon.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the commission. There's some issues with this pavement condition. Gravel does not constitute building a road to public standards in the county code. I know some of the issues may be different because this is a rural development, but when I look at our county standards, either it has to be blacktop, a certain width, or concrete surface. So gravel, in my opinion, does not constitute being a road or building a road to public standard requirement. And I don't know if the owner or the developer plans on turning this over to the county for maintenance, snow removal, ditch cleaning out, that type of thing. But those are some major concerns here. As Mr. Klinghammer said, I also have some problems where the county is doing a special favor for a developer when they should really be negotiating with the adjoining property owners to acquire that property at a fair market value to gain access to their land. It's not the county's fault that the owner bought it without the proper egress and ingress into this property. They should have made sure that that was contingent or part of their buying of this property. I don't like it when government gets involved in private property owner rights and gives special passes to developers. They should work that out with adjoining property owners. Now, public requirements. Americans with Disabilities Act, I heard nothing about that. I heard nothing about handicap accessibility with sidewalks to this property. Signage, since we're talking about a 90-degree bend or a T-type, we want to make sure that there's not accidents in vehicular and pedestrian traffic. It should be the #1 concern of this commission and the county council. So signage, that there be a condition placed on this road improvement, and that is a mirror installation. As you know, in some subdivisions where there's a large bend and people can't see coming around that curve or that bend, there's a mirror on a post. So the oncoming traffic either way can see if there's traffic coming at that 90-degree or T-bend. I think that's imperative. I don't understand why staff didn't recommend that, but that should be part of the planning process is to ensure vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Letters, again, from our partners. Access screening from the Missouri Department of Transportation and Highways. I don't see any letter from MoDOT. What about the Wentzville Fire Protection District? Is this a adequate width to get their tanker trucks, their ladder truck in case it's needed to respond to a fire to this subdivision? I don't see a letter from the fire marshal or the fire chief of the Wentzville Fire Protection District. I think it's imperative that staff should have notified them to get their comments on this project. What about the St. Charles County Ambulance District? Will they have ample access and turning radius to respond to emergency medical needs or EMS needs to residents of the subdivision? And finally, the Wentzville School District, with its overcrowding issues, will they be able to service the students that will move into the subdivision? It may be at a minimum since they're 3-acre lots, but as we all know, the Wentzville School District is bursting at the seams once again and need to pass a bond issue to add more classroom space. Also, I don't see a letter from the Transportation Department of the Wentzville School District, and they withdrew the variance of the cul-de-sac, but I want to make sure that their buses have ample turning radius in this cul-de-sac and ample means of egress and ingress in this subdivision for the safety of our children. Those are the comments, and I appreciate you hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to come up and address any of these issues, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The road meets county standards. When you have a lot that's over 3 acres in size, and as you know, we're not even considering the lots because that's not part of this application. But a gravel road is what the county standard calls for. So it doesn't need to be blacktop, it doesn't need to be concrete. So I think that addresses that. We would not be turning this road over to the county.
Okay.
It's obviously a private road.
Right.
The sidewalks are not an issue, again, because that's not what the county standard calls for. If the staff or the county code doesn't call for signage, but if somebody wants us to put a sign up because they believe it would be helpful, we're happy to do it. And if, the commission or the staff would recommend, or the county council recommend a parabolic mirror, we certainly can do it. I think it might likely get vandalized, but, and this is only going to have 10-acre plus lots, so at maximum, you're going to have 8 homes there. So you're not talking about some busy subdivision. As for the Wentzville Fire Protection District, the road meets county standards. It's a 42-foot wide right-of-way, and the gravel width and the amount of gravel meets the county standards. So, all we're talking about is the road.
Right.
So having the school district weigh in on the road and pupils is not relevant. The radius is 55 feet in the cul-de-sac, which is what the Wentzville School District and the Fire Protection District require. So we have met that. And again, as for the variance, what we're talking about are characteristics of this property that do not allow us to meet the requirements of the county's ordinance. If we could meet it, we would meet it. And an example of that is the cul-de-sac length. When we got the comment, we looked at it and said, oh, well, we can meet that. We should change our plan, so we did. There's nothing we can do here. So that is why I think the variance, the strict application of this requirement is that, we don't have a legal access, we can't have access to our property, and we can't develop our property. The applicant is entitled to have some development of his property. This isn't something, if you could remedy it, we would. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you for doing that. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
At this point, I'd like to bring it back to the council here and for discussion.
I guess my question would be to Robert, if that's all right. Does the county have a position on whether or not the little curve is better at the terminus, or would the county prefer it to be a T-type intersection?
I think there's a little bit more advantage to having a T intersection. It's essentially just two streets coming together at a T, you know, put up a stop sign, for instance, going each way. And I don't know, I think there's some benefit to that.
Okay.
Seems to make sense to me.
Okay. So do we have a motion? Let's see, I want to make sure. So we're making a recommendation for the approval with the variance for the angle of the driveway. Is that the correct way of stating that, you think?
Requesting a variance for the entrance, either for the curve radius of a continuous street or a T intersection, one or the other. And maybe I would add that with the T intersection, in my mind, would have a benefit. It'd be easier to carry a street on through to the neighboring properties, so someday they may be able to connect in potentially if they have the rights to.
If they built it that way, does it still need a variance? And is it a variance from what? Because what's wrong with a T intersection being there? I guess that's the part I'm a little fuzzy on.
It's a technicality, but where the two streets would intersect,
Right.
there still would need to be a little bit of a curve radius where they intersect, and that it would be a tight curve. It would come together at virtually a 90-degree. You wouldn't be able to make make a quick turn. You'd have to come to a complete stop and turn right.
Well, presumably, if we required a stop sign there, they would have to come to a
Yeah.
full stop anyway.
Yeah.
Because everybody pays attention to stop signs.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, especially in rural areas.
Yeah.
All right, so what, do we have a motion to approve application PRE 19-09, private road dedication plat located at the east end of Highway T with the variance for the angle of the road to be either a T entrance or, what was the other one you said, Robert?
I said the curve radius of either a continuous street or for a T intersection.
Okay, with a continuous street or T intersection.
Mr. Chairman, I'd propose that we just make it a T intersection, eliminate the curved route completely. The applicant said that they're amenable to that. Staff has said that that is their preferred method, so why don't we just call it a T intersection and be done with it?
Okay. So the recommendation is for approval of this with the angle being a T entrance. So you've made that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. So, Ms. Sally?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhn?
Yes.
Mr. Leonard?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Klinghammer?
Yes.
And I vote yes also.
Thank
So,
you.
at this point, I guess I have a question. With doing that, we have now approved that we don't have to have a second vote, correct? It's just with that variance.
This is a recommendation to the county council.
Right.
Because there's a variance involved.
With the variance involved. Okay.
Right. And then, now, should this be approved by the county council, it would be the preliminary plat, well, the preliminary approval, they still come forward with final approval to county staff. They would have to meet certain administrative requirements, but this would be the only public approvals they would need.
All right, very good. So do we have an approval of the minutes from the July 17th?
Motion for
2019?
approval is submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any additional business?
If I could give just briefly a Planning Zoning Division update. You may be aware that the county council recently passed the medical marijuana ordinance, and the medical marijuana ordinance lays out all the permits and the approvals that would be necessary from the county in order to operate certain facilities. And those facilities could be a dispensary, it could be cultivation facility, transportation facility, testing, and I think one other category.
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing, yes, manufacturing. Over the last, what I wanted to mention was that in terms of planning and zoning, county staff has been receiving zoning confirmation requests from applicants to the state for sites that they're interested in pursuing. And so far, all of the sites have, none of the sites have qualified. And it's been mainly the distance to residential requirement. Right now in the ordinance, or in the ordinance, I should say, there's a certain distance that has to meet from both residences or residential use and from residential zoning districts. And so that's something that in and of itself is really has disqualified quite a number of sites. But additionally, there's a requirement to meet minimum distances from schools, university, places of worship, and those are the categories I can think of. So we've, in the Planning and Zoning Division, we've created a GIS project to allow us to do measurements from residential zoning districts, for instance, and from schools, and from places of worship. So now we can go in and we can do measurements and for an analysis. In terms of floodplain reviews, the Planning and Zoning Division has been very involved with responding to the flood within the past few months and over the past few months. And one of the main ways that we've been involved is we're really responsible for administration of the floodplain development ordinance. So we've been performing reviews of floodplain development permits and also what's called substantial damage estimates. One of the rules of the county's code is that if you have a house, for instance, that's within these floodplain districts and the house is not elevated above what's called the base flood elevation, should improvements be made at the request of the property owner, should improvements be made such that the improvements are valued at more than 50% of the value of the house has to be elevated as part of that improvement project. So homes that are damaged by the flood and where the damage is such that it's more than 50%, they really have and the house is not elevated, they have two ways they can go with it. They can elevate the house or they can demolish the house. And so we're involved with what's called a substantial damage estimate. We're using the county's procedures that were developed by FEMA, and we also use specific software called Substantial Damage Estimator. So we performed quite a few of these. In fact, frankly, we're working early mornings and weekends to try to help people, to speed up the process to help people make repairs as necessary. In fact, at this point, the activities within our Citizen Serve software, floodplain damage reviews, just 2 people within our division has done about 1,500 of these floodplain damage reviews. So I guess the long and short of it is we're involved very much in helping people make repairs to their house and or bringing in their buildings into conformity with the floodplain development regulations. I should just quickly and finally, I want to correct some information that I gave a couple months ago. So I want to ask a question. Are you running into situations where the zoning, because of the flooding, the zoning of the property would cause people not to be rebuilt? At that time, no. Now we're starting to encounter a few situations where maybe the property is zoned industrial, and there's a house on it, or maybe the property is zoned some other zoning district where a house is not allowed by right, and now if that house is substantially damaged, they can't rebuild the house. They would have to come into conformity with that industrial zoning or whatever zoning district it's in. So we do have a few of those cases coming up now.
Robert, if I could ask, do you have a estimate or on how many homes have substantial damage over the 50% level?
I think I'll let Ellie respond to that.
I don't have an estimate this week, but when we do these, we're also contracting with West Alton. So between the county and West Alton, I know the number's well over 200 so far.
Wow. The 200 homes will either need to be destroyed, demolished, or elevated.
Yes.
Okay.
And if they are, okay, so they can't rebuild even if they bring it up above the flood base level?
Yes, they can. They'd have
Okay.
to elevate as part of their project.
But I mean, they couldn't do
yeah.
as new construction, or is it repaired?
If the rehabilitation is more than 50% of the value of the home,
Yeah.
then they have to elevate. And I will tell you that 50% is counted not just in any one project, but we track that over 5 years, period. So if someone puts more than 50% of the value of that structure in within any 5-year period, they have to elevate. And I should also say that a lot of flood insurance has a special rider, and I forgot the specific term for it, but the result is that it can provide, if they're flood damaged, a lot of insurance, flood insurance can provide up, $30,000 or $35,000 specifically to elevate the structure. So for people who have flood insurance, they do have a way to pay for the elevation. A lot of people do.
Robert, I got a question. How do you handle someone, you make your assessment, and you're gonna say this house has got 55% damage.
Mm-hmm.
This guy goes out and gets a bid from a contractor, and he can put it back in place for 40%. How do you handle that?
Well, we take that as part of the assessment. If someone has their own information, they can supply that to us and we can review it. But I would say that under our ordinance, it says specifically what it names, enumerates the things that we include within our damage assessment. So there is a way for people to provide information that we can use to take that into consideration. And also, once we make a determination, there's an appeal process. If they feel that if there's just a disagreement on the numbers, there's an appeal process.
Early indication from what I'm hearing out there is your assessments are extremely high based on what it will take to put this house back to a livable house.
What's that?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
What I would like to point out on the assessments, yes, there have been some people that have grumbled, but these are FEMA guidelines, and it's the same guidelines that an insurance adjuster uses. So when they send the staff out, sometimes they cannot get in the house. Everybody's been asked to call for an assessment so that they can get in and take a look and do a detailed assessment. Sometimes they have to do it basically by just looking at the level of the water line and trying to estimate. And I can tell you this, when they do complain, they will call in and they will get somebody out there to really take a close look at it. And then we will take a closer look at it. And hopefully we can reconcile this. But there is an appeal process. The first thing is they would show us their insurance report from their adjuster. Many times we're well within a range, and I would say maybe plus or minus 10%. I know that's a big range, but But most of the time, we're within that range. And then if they don't have insurance, the second way is like Robert mentioned with a contractor estimate. The building division knows exactly what needs to be in that, whether or not it needs complete electrical repair or just outlets. Just as an example, whether the mechanical systems got damaged, whether a subfloor needs to be replaced. Sometimes when that water sits there for 60 days, which it did, that was the average, 60 days. Sometimes it was longer than that. Sometimes it was much shorter. But if it sits there, then that subfloor will eventually rot and crack. It may not happen this year, may not happen next year, but those are some of the examples. They'll check that off, and then they'll check to see if that's included in the contractor's estimate for materials and labor. We have to count both and be fair across the board.
Robert, I had a question. On the medical marijuana, what type of zoning do we anticipate that falling under? Would it be a commercial, or would it be where there's manufacturing, would it be industrial, or how would that be?
Right.
So,
Depending on the type of facility, like for instance, cultivation facility is allowed within agricultural zoning districts with a conditional use permit. Dispensaries and manufacturing facilities could be allowed potentially in commercial and industrial zoning districts by right if they met all of the setback requirements.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you much. Any other business? Okay, Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
See you.
Good seeing you.